Helena Blavatsky did not invent Shambhala. The concept existed in Tibetan Buddhist tradition long before she arrived. A hidden kingdom, somewhere in the high Himalayas, inhabited by enlightened beings who preserved ancient wisdom. Accessible not through physical travel, but through spiritual development sufficient to perceive it. Blavatsky took this tradition and made it the headquarters of her masters. In her framework, Shambhala was not metaphorical. It was a physical location, a hidden city in the Gobi Desert region, where the Mahatmas lived and worked, monitoring human development, communicating with chosen individuals like herself, and preserving the secret doctrine that would eventually be released to a humanity ready to receive it. The masters she corresponded with, Moria and Kothumi, resided there. The Book of Gyan was preserved there. Everything her entire system rested on had its physical anchor in a city that no Western explorer had ever located. She described it with specificity: the architecture, the library, the atmosphere of the place, a density of accumulated wisdom that manifested as something almost physical. Her followers accepted this. Her critics noted that a headquarters no one could visit and no one could disprove was a remarkably convenient foundation. What happened next was neither acceptance nor criticism. It was something considerably more dangerous. In the early 20th century, the idea of Shambhala migrated into German and Austrian nationalist occultism. The same figures who had taken Blavatsky's root race doctrine and rebuilt it around biological racial hierarchy became obsessed with the hidden city. In their version, Shambhala was not the home of spiritually advanced beings. It was the ancestral homeland of the Aryan race, the origin point of a superior civilization that had seeded human development across the ancient world and then retreated, waiting. This version of Shambhala became a serious object of pursuit. The Nazi SS, under Heinrich Himmler, who was personally obsessed with occult history, dispatched multiple expeditions to Tibet. The most documented was Ernst Schaeffer's 1938 expedition, officially framed as a scientific survey of Tibetan culture and biology. 5 men, 14 months, thousands of measurements, photographs, and specimens brought back to Germany. The expedition did not find Shambhala. What it found, and what the Ahnenerbe researchers did with the material they collected, fed directly into the racial science apparatus. The same apparatus that was simultaneously constructing the ideological justification for what was being built in Europe. Blavatsky's hidden city, translated through 30 years of occult nationalism, had become a destination for SS researchers looking for the origin point of a master race. She had described Shambhala as a place of pure preserved wisdom, the repository of everything humanity had forgotten. What the men who followed her ideas were looking for in the Tibetan mountains was a justification for what they were already doing. The city, if it exists, did not give it to them. They went home and supplied it themselves. Blavatsky died believing she had given the world access to ancient wisdom that would elevate human consciousness. The trajectory of her ideas through the first half of the 20th century is the most disturbing argument against that belief. It is also, in fairness, not the only trajectory her ideas took. Gandhi read her. Yeats read her. The founders of the modern environmental movement read her. The intellectual history of Theosophy runs through some of the worst ideas of the 20th century, and some of its most humane ones simultaneously. Shambhala is still there, or it isn't. The people looking for it have always found what they brought with them. Helena Blavatsky published 3 major works in her lifetime. Most people have never read or even heard of them. Yet ideas in those books moved through the 20th century like water through rock, finding pathways their author never intended. Reshaping the intellectual and spiritual landscape, its influence traveled far from its source, almost impossible to trace cleanly. This is the story of what 3 books did after their author died. Isis Unveiled arrived in 1877, selling out in 10 days. It argued Western civilization erred, accepting materialism as the only truth. Blavatsky claimed ancient civilizations held knowledge beyond modern science. Spiritualist phenomena proved these forces still operated. This argument arrived at the right moment. Victorian science, triumphant yet deeply unsatisfying to many. Darwin removed theology. Capitalism removed community. Many felt something important was lost, yet recoverable. Blavatsky gave that audience a framework. The Secret Doctrine in 1888 gave them a cosmology. 1,500 pages, dense and demanding. Readers emerged with an alternative human history, a map of consciousness, and a sense of participating in something profound. Those readers went in remarkable directions. William Butler Yeats joined the Theosophical Society in 1887, working through its implications for decades. His cosmological system, a vision, is incomprehensible without its theosophical foundations. The mystical symbolism in his poetry, the gyres, historical cycles, interpenetration of human and divine, came directly from Blavatsky. Mahatma Gandhi encountered Theosophy in London as a young law student in the 1880s, introduced by Theosophists. He read Blavatsky and The Voice of the Silence repeatedly. His concept of selfless service had roots in Theosophy. Rudolf Steiner built anthroposophy on theosophical foundations before developing his own system. The Waldorf schools, educating children worldwide, descend directly from Steiner's modifications of Blavatsky's ideas. And in Munich, after the First World War, a different set of readers found something different in the same texts. The Ariosophists, occult nationalists, stripped Blavatsky's root race doctrine of its spiritual content. They rebuilt it around biological racial hierarchy, finding a cosmological justification for their ideas in Weimar Germany. The connection between theosophical thought and National Socialist ideology is documented intellectual history. Blavatsky did not build what followed. She was dead by 1891. She could not have anticipated this direction, or perhaps could not have brought herself to anticipate the direction her ideas would travel in the hands of others. 3 books. 1 lifetime of writing. Yeats, Gandhi, Steiner, the architects of racial ideology. All reading the same pages, finding entirely different worlds inside them. The Society for Psychical Research was not founded to debunk the supernatural. It was founded in 1882 by serious Cambridge academics who believed that paranormal phenomena deserved rigorous investigation. Frederick Myers, Edmund Gurney, Henry Sidgwick, the professor of moral philosophy. These were not credulous men. They were among the most rigorous empirical thinkers of the Victorian era. They were convinced that something was happening in seance rooms and spiritualist circles that science had not yet accounted for. When they heard about Helena Blavatsky, they sent someone to investigate. What the witnesses had been reporting for years before that investigation was extraordinary. The accounts came from people with no obvious motive to fabricate. Journalists, retired military officers, a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, a judge, a future president of the Indian National Congress. They had visited the Theosophical compound in Madras, attended demonstrations, and reported things they could not explain. Letters from the masters materialized inside a locked shrine cabinet in front of multiple witnesses simultaneously. Objects appeared from nowhere in the center of sealed rooms. A woman reported a letter from Coulomb appearing on her pillow in a room she had locked herself. A retired colonel reported a physical object, a brooch, disappearing from his hand and reappearing inside a sealed box he had not touched. The phenomena were not private. They were witnessed repeatedly by different people under varying conditions, with no consistent evidence of a mechanism. The specific quality that most witnesses described was not trauma. It was ordinariness. Blavatsky herself was not performing during the phenomena. She was usually in conversation, distracted, sometimes visibly irritated, The objects arrived without ceremony. The letters appeared between one moment and the next. Witnesses consistently noted that the most unsettling aspect was not the phenomenon itself, but the complete absence of theatrical buildup around it. A woman who produces roses from the air while standing in a spotlight invites skepticism. A woman who is mid-conversation about philosophy when a letter drops from the ceiling onto the table between her and her guests invites something harder to categorize. The SPR's initial investigators, before Hodgson arrived, were genuinely uncertain. Two of them, Hodgson's predecessors, filed a preliminary report suggesting the phenomena were real and warranted serious continued investigation. This report was quietly set aside after the Coulombs made their allegations and Hodgson produced his verdict. What the 1986 reassessment recovered, among the methodological criticisms of Hodgson's work, was the buried preliminary report. The investigators who had been there before the allegations, before the hidden panel was alleged, had seen something they could not explain, and said so in writing. That document existed. It had been in the SPR archive for a century. The question it raises is not whether Blavatsky was genuine. It is what the witnesses were actually seeing, before there was a verdict to fit their observations into. Human beings are poor witnesses under normal conditions. Under conditions of expectation, in the presence of a charismatic figure, in an atmosphere deliberately constructed to produce receptivity, the mechanisms that generate perception become unreliable in ways that are now well documented. This explains a great deal of what the witnesses reported. It does not explain the brooch. The retired colonel's account of the object disappearing from his hand was investigated by 3 separate people at different times. None of them found a mechanism. He had held it himself. He felt it go. The SPR closed the file on Blavatsky in 1885. They partially reopened it. In 1986, the file has not been formally closed since. What the witnesses said is still in the archive, still waiting for an explanation that fully accounts for all of it. In the autumn of 1884, a 24-year-old investigator stepped off a ship in Madras with a brief from the Society for Psychical Research. His name was Richard Hodgson. He had never investigated anything like this before. He would spend the rest of his life wishing he had never investigated this. Helena Blavatsky had built something extraordinary. From a rented house in New York in 1875, she constructed a global movement. The Theosophical Society, with branches across Europe, America, and India. Thousands of members. Serious figures. Scientists, philosophers. A future president of the Indian National Congress. A Nobel Prize-winning poet. These were not credulous people. They had come because of what they witnessed or heard reported. Letters from hidden masters appearing inside a locked shrine cabinet. Objects materializing from nowhere. Messages arriving without human delivery in rooms where no one had entered. Blavatsky explained this through her masters. Advanced spiritual beings living in Tibet, communicating across vast distances. She said she had trained with them for years. She said they had chosen her specifically. Then 2 people who had seen everything told a different story. Emma and Alexis Coulomb had lived inside Blavatsky's Madras compound for 4 years. They had been taken in when they had nothing, given positions of trust, made part of the inner circle. In 1884, while Blavatsky was in Europe, something broke between Emma and the Society's local leadership. Emma went to a Christian missionary magazine with a package of letters she claimed Blavatsky had written to her, detailing exactly how the phenomena were faked. The hidden panel in the shrine cabinet, the concealed passage behind it, the system for delivering the Mahatma letters through mechanical means, while attributing them to supernatural origin. The magazine published everything in September 1884. Hodgson arrived in Madras 3 months later. He found the hidden panel. He confirmed the concealed passage. He examined the letters, compared handwriting, interviewed witnesses, and spent months assembling a case. His report, published in 1885, was 200 pages long and categorical in its conclusion. The phenomena were staged. The masters did not exist. Blavatsky was one of the most accomplished impostors in recorded history. He added something else. He suggested she was a Russian intelligence asset, using the Theosophical Society to gather information across British India during a period of imperial tension. This allegation was the weakest part of the report, thin on evidence, and largely dismissed by later historians, but it ensured the document landed like a bomb rather than a verdict. Blavatsky's response was fury. Thousands of words of denial, counter-argument, and personal attack on Hodgson, the Coulombs, and the SPR itself. Her followers accepted her account entirely. Her critics found the denials predictable. She never returned to India. She spent her final years in Europe, writing the secret doctrine, founding new lodges, and dying in 1891. With the SPR verdict officially attached to her name, the case stayed closed for a century. In 1986, the SPR published a paper by Dr. Vernon Harrison, a professional document examiner, concluding that the Hodgson Report was methodologically flawed, that the handwriting analysis was unreliable, that the Coulomb letters showed signs of alteration, passages added in different ink that changed the meaning of the originals, that Hodgson had built a seemingly airtight case on foundations that did not bear close examination. The SPR published this in their own journal. The organization that had convicted her was formally expressing doubt about its own verdict. What Harrison did not conclude was that Blavatsky was innocent. The hidden panel existed. The concealed passage existed. The question of what they proved, absent testimony that could now be trusted, remained open. The most accomplished impostor in history, or the most aggressively discredited genuine phenomenon of the 19th century. 100 years of investigation. The same answer at the end of it. We don't know.